The wedding reception was everything a father hopes for. Soft music drifted through the ballroom. Crystal lights reflected off polished glass. Guests moved between tables carrying champagne and laughter. From where Michael sat, his daughter looked happy, truly happy. For most of the evening, that was enough. The years leading up to the wedding had not been simple. There had been disagreements, periods of distance, bond calls that ended too quickly, conversations neither of them quite knew how to have. Still, they had arrived here. The relationship wasn't perfect, but it felt stable. Or at least Michael believed it did. As dinner ended, the speeches began. The maid of honor spoke first, then a college friend, the room filled with stories, jokes, and affectionate embarrassment. Eventually, Michael's daughter stood and accepted the microphone. Applause followed. She smiled warmly. At first, her speech sounded exactly like everyone expected. Stories from childhood, family memories, moments that made guests laugh. Then something shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly. She began describing her father. The first story involved a school performance he missed. Guests laughed politely. The second involved a forgotten birthday event. More laughter, then came another. And another. Each memory carried the same theme. A father who was absent, distracted, unavailable. None of the stories were invented. Michael remembered every one of them. That was what made the moment so unsettling. The events were real. The conclusions felt unfamiliar. As the speech continued, guests exchanged increasingly uncertain glances. The laughter became hesitant. The room seemed unsure whether these stories were affectionate or something else. His daughter kept smiling confidently, unaware of the growing discomfort. Michael remained still. The easiest response would have been anger. Instead, he felt confusion because he recognized the facts. What he didn't recognize was the version of himself emerging from them, a man defined entirely by moments he failed, a father reduced to his absences. The speech ended to warm applause. People stood, glasses raised, the celebration moved forward. Yet something lingered in the room, an uneasiness difficult to name. Michael noticed it immediately. Years of managing difficult situations had made him attentive to emotional shifts. Some guests avoided eye contact. Others looked at him sympathetically. Several older relatives seemed thoughtful rather than amused. He said nothing. The wedding wasn't the place for correction, nor was it the place for self-defense. An hour later, as dessert was served, another toast began. This one came from Evelyn, an elderly family friend who had known Michael's daughter since infancy. Evelyn wasn't on the official schedule. Nobody expected her to speak, which was probably why everyone listened. She stood slowly, raised her glass, and smiled toward the newlyweds. At first, her remarks focused entirely on the couple, love, commitment, partnership. Then she paused. Her eyes drifted toward Michael, then toward his daughter. "I've been thinking about family stories tonight." The room grew quiet. Evelyn continued carefully. "When we're young, we often remember the moments that hurt." No one moved. "That's natural." Her voice remained gentle. "We don't always see what was happening around those moments." Several guests exchanged glances. Michael's daughter lowered her eyes slightly. Evelyn wasn't criticizing. She was remembering. "I remember that school performance." The room became very still. "I also remember your father driving 3 hours after learning he wouldn't arrive before the curtain opened." Silence. Evelyn continued. "I remember the birthday he missed." A pause. "I also remember why he missed it." Another pause. "He was sitting beside your grandfather in a hospital room." The room's energy shifted immediately, not dramatically, thoughtfully. Story by story, Evelyn added context, not excuses. Textectitles invisible to a child, responsibilities, difficult choices, competing obligations, the realities adults rarely explain fully to their children. By the time she finished, the room felt different, not because Michael had been vindicated, because complexity had returned. The simple narrative no longer worked. His daughter sat quietly. The confidence that had carried her speech earlier seemed replaced by uncertainty, not shame. The distinction mattered. Evelyn raised her glass one final time. "Families rarely contain heroes or villains." She smiled softly. "Mostly they contain people doing their best while occasionally failing each other." The toast ended. Nobody rushed to speak. The silence felt earned. Later that evening, long after guests returned to dancing, Michael stepped outside onto a terrace overlooking the city lights. Cold air drifted through the night. A few minutes later, his daughter joined him. Neither spoke immediately. The music from inside sounded distant. Finally, she broke the silence. "I didn't know some of those things." Michael nodded. "I know." She stared out across the city. "For years, I thought I understood those memories." The words sounded fragile. Honest Michael could have defended himself, listed sacrifices, explained decisions. Instead, he chose a different path. "You understood your part of them." She looked at him. "And you?" He smiled faintly. "I understood mine." For the first time all evening, they both laughed, not because anything was resolved, because they finally recognized the same truth. They had spent years living inside the same events while carrying entirely different stories about them. The wedding ended beautifully. The marriage began. The celebration remained intact. Yet the most important moment happened far from the dance floor. A father and daughter discovered that memory is not a courtroom. It is a collection of perspectives, and sometimes healing begins not when someone proves they were right, but when both people become willing to admit the story might be larger than either of them remembered.